as I've said before, I haven't done a webinar for a while, actually, since last Thyroid Awareness Week. So I apologise now if anything goes wrong, because I had to try and remind myself of how to do various things. So first of all, for those that don't know, my name is Lyn Mynott and I'm CEO of Thyroid UK. And I'm also the founder. I founded it as a different name about 20 years ago because I was really upset about how I'd been treated. I'd been ill for 15 years without anyone knowing what was wrong with me. You know, I was told it's in my mind. I was told I'd got fibromyalgia, told, do you need some antidepressants? Do you need to see a psychiatrist? And then it actually turned out that it was thyroid, and I only found that out because a lump came up in my thyroid and I went to the doctors. They immediately sent me to hospital to do a test on it. It was inconclusive, so they took my right lobe away and put me on 200 micrograms of levothyroxine, which actually made me really, really ill with overactivity. And it was at that point that I thought, hang on a minute, they don't really know what they're doing with me. So I looked into it a little bit more and found someone else who'd had similar problems, and we started campaigning, and now we are here. And I think that we managed to help a lot of people, although there are still a lot of problems in thyroid diagnosis and treatment. So I'm really glad that everybody could come, and the talks this year are short and sweet. The speakers will be speaking for around 15 minutes, and then there will be a 15-minute question and answer session. So hopefully you'll be able to get all your questions in. So first of all, there's some housekeeping. For anybody else who's joined since the last time I said this, the webinar is being filmed and we will be placing it onto our website once it's edited. All attendees will be notified of the link so that they can watch it again. And I will also be putting it, I think, onto our YouTube channel. There will be a page put up at the end of the webinar with various links to documents that I've talked about. But if you miss that for any reason, you can always contact me and we'll be able to send you this whole presentation. So you'll have all the links that are on there. If question times runs out, please send an email to me at enquiries@thyroiduk.org with your question and the name of the relevant speaker, and we will contact you. For those of you that don't know much about what we do, our main thing that we do is we provide information and resources to promote effective diagnosis and appropriate treatment for people with diagnosed and those with undiagnosed thyroid disorders in the UK. As we know, a lot of people aren't diagnosed because they have borderline hypothyroidism or borderline overactive, and we need the appropriate treatment for us, whether that be levothyroxine, because a lot of people do feel better on levo. But for a lot of people, we need T3, and for some people, they need natural thyroid hormone like armathyroid or erythrithyroid. And we will be campaigning after the T3 campaign is hopefully finished. We will be doing different campaigning, one of which we hope to do about NDT. We have an online community, Health Unlocked. We have lots of members on there, and both members and our admin team are really, really helpful. If you have any queries, somebody on there will answer your question for you. We also have social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Again, if you do ask questions on there, it's usually me that goes on in the morning. I check if there's any questions from people and I answer them. We have a paid membership, which is either £17 or £22 from January. And for that, you get 4 magazines, but you're also supporting us because it's classed as a donation. and we get gift aid on membership fees. So do please join if you can. We're hoping to do a telephone helpline in the very near future. We're trying to fundraise for that now. And I know we have the forum, which is nice for people to chat online, but there are some people who don't want to chat online. They want to actually speak to someone with very specific questions, and our helpline hopefully will be run by people that we've trained, not doctors. They will be people that we've trained from experiences of other patients. We work with testing companies such as Medichecks, who are really helping us a lot in this Thyroid Awareness Week. And we've now started working with an ultrasound scan clinic, because in Europe, doctors automatically do thyroid scans as part of the diagnostic workup. But in the UK, they only do a scan if there's a lump there, which we think it would be good to have scans, especially if you've Hashimoto's, to be able to see how good or bad your thyroid is working. You can find links to lots of things on the top of our homepage. We have an e-news that goes out whenever I have time to do it, to be honest. And we also have an information pack that has lots of information about thyroid issues. This year, we've done lots of things to raise awareness this year, and we've had a lot of help from Medichecks. So I'd like to give Medichecks a great big thank you. Not only for doing some of the activities for us, but also they're going to be donating £2 for each thyroid test sold during Thyroid Awareness Week. So if you are planning to have a test done by Medichecks, or if you're thinking about it, do get it done during Thyroid Awareness Week, because it's then supporting us as well. Butterfly Day is on Friday, the 22nd of October, and we're hoping that people will put tattoos of butterflies on themselves somewhere, like mine. I don't know, I've got a tiny little one there because I don't have a thyroid. And also face paints. If you want to face your paint with butterflies, that would be good. We have the Winging It campaign, which is we want people to put coloured eyeliner on to show that we are winging it with our medication, which we are. A lot of people are winging it, myself included. I had my T3 and NDT stopped about 3 years ago, and I'm having to get hold of my own thyroid medication, which I know a lot of people are. So I do feel like I'm winging it, because I have no doctors monitoring me, because if you're not on treatment, they won't do thyroid testing. So I do my own thyroid testing. Medichecks have done a little how-to video showing you how to do eyeliner. I've never used eyeliner in my entire life, but I will be putting some on Monday and taking some photos and putting it on our social media pages. And Louise, my PA, will be doing the same, and Dion, who's the financial manager, she'll be doing the same. We'll all be here Monday morning making our faces up. Medichecks have also designed an amazing butterfly filter that you can use on Facebook and Instagram so that we can spread awareness. If men don't want to do the eyeliner, they can put the filter on, because they won't have to do anything except fiddle with your phone. I must admit, I've never done a filter in my life, but I've been shown how to do it. So hopefully I'll be able to do that on Monday as well. We're asking employees and the public, including friends and family, to donate just £1 to Thyroid UK to help us raise awareness and do some of our other campaigns. All you have to do is text TAW to 70085, and £1, I think a lot of people would be able to manage to do that. And the more people that can donate it, the more work we can get done. Alice Godfrey, nutritionist, has made some lovely little videos for us that will be on our YouTube channel. We're going to be launching one per day as from Monday, so do watch out for those. We're also launching our partnership with the Ren Project, and Alice will be talking to you about that in a moment. It's a listening service, which I think is going to be really, really important for people with thyroid disease to help with how they feel about just generally how they feel about the thyroid, how they feel about how they're being treated. We're also launching a new support group that at the beginning will be on Zoom, so that might be of interest to people. Lord Hunt is going to be putting some parliamentary questions for us to Her Majesty's Government during Thyroid Awareness Week about liothyronine, and I'm really pleased about that. The first one I think he's going to put up is to ask Her Majesty's Government whether NHS clinical commissioners have now written to all local health authorities to emphasise to them that they are expected to follow national guidance for prescribing liothyronine, including allowing it to be prescribed when recommended by a specialist when treatment with levothyroxine alone has failed. So I'm really pleased about that one, and it'll be interesting to see what the answer is. And another one that I think is going to be really important is that he's going to ask Her Majesty's Government if liothyronine should now be declassified as a high-cost medicine, given the Competitions and Market Authority recent ruling and fine of £100 million issued to the drug company Advance for artificially inflating the price between 2007 and 2016. We are really hoping that this can happen and then get back to how we were before, when T3 was able to be prescribed for anyone that needed it. This is Alice Peck, who is Director of Communications at the Ren Project. I'm really pleased to tell you that we've started partnering with the Ren Project, and we'll be launching the partnership tomorrow. And Alice is here to tell you all about them. So off you go, Alice.
Thanks, Lynn, and thanks so much for having me. I think just hearing your introduction and realising that I know so little about my own thyroid condition and how important it is that organisations like you exist to help people navigate it. So as Lynn mentioned, my name's Alice. I am a director at the Ren Project, and I'm a co-founder. And I want to tell you a little bit about the Ren Project today, not just kind of what we do, but also how we might how we partner with organisations like Thyroid UK and why we believe in what we're doing. So I have a thyroid condition. I have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I also have alopecia, as you can see. So I'm actively autoimmune. And I think some of the things we're seeing is how many people who have one condition also have multiple autoimmune diseases. I also didn't quite expect to be speaking to over 100 people, so I'm a little bit nervous. So if I ramble a little bit, please forgive me. So the Ren Project, we came into being at the beginning of, the idea came to being at the beginning of the lockdown in March 2020, when I got a phone call from Kate. And I had met Kate when we were both volunteers in the refugee crisis in northern Greece. At that point, neither of us knew that the other had an autoimmune disease. My alopecia was still invisible. Obviously, my Hashimoto's you couldn't tell. And Kate, who has lupus, also didn't tell me what she was going through. And so when we reconnected last year, we began to share the impact of our illnesses. And what we really noticed was, despite hugely different medical conditions, we had such a huge, a similar experience in the kind of emotional and social impact of getting a diagnosis. And we could really relate to the sense of confusion, of powerlessness, of loneliness, and of mental illness of getting an autoimmune disease. And we were really struck by the similarities in this. And Kate had this idea of offering support to people when they're diagnosed at a time when it can be very isolating, it can be very scary, you don't really know what's happening. You go to the doctor for support, they give you some medication, it might not help, as Lynn said, it might make you feel worse. You might speak to friends and family and they give you their advice and their opinion, and it's kind of overwhelming and confusing, and suddenly your life has changed and you're forced to accept a new identity and also grieve the person who you were, and it can be really hard. I'm sure I'm speaking to many people who can understand that. And so Kate had this idea to support people at this point, and we looked at what existed already and did a bit of research and realized we were not alone in this experience. Some NHS statistics are that 66% of people with autoimmune disease have mental health problems. And those are just the people who've come forward and disclosed. And that 61% are struggling to cope with their condition. And there's a huge toll on relationships, on your ability to sustain regular employment. And all of this impacts at an individual level and affects who you are and how you feel. And looking at the kind of support that existed, the NHS offers medical support, and it's invaluable and it's crucial. And I think I lived in the US for 6 years, and I cannot tell you how grateful I am every day that we have a national health service. But we all know how hard it is to get an appointment with the doctor or to form a consistent, ongoing relationship, not to mention the impact of COVID. And then charities like Thyroid UK, like Alopecia UK, like Lupus UK, like Diabetes UK, also invaluable in the kind of research and information and communities that they provide. And I think just listening to Lyn talking about what Thyroid UK does in terms of the information and resources, the campaigns, the online communities, and the helpline, for a specific question about and sort of need about a diagnosis, I think there's nothing better than these charities. But they don't have capacity at the moment to provide one-to-one ongoing listening support. And I think what we've realized is the importance of having a space where you can talk about what you're going through when it can be so uprooting and life-changing. And to get that kind of support, you either have to be on a 6-month plus wait list for psychological services, or you have to pay for it, and that's incredibly expensive. So we saw a gap and a need, and we founded the Ren Project. And what we hope to do, and what we are doing, is looking beyond the specific diagnosis to what connects us despite the differences in our diseases. And what we've seen is just the confusion and the powerlessness and the hope and helplessness of a new diagnosis. And we decided to create the space where people who've just been diagnosed can come and have support and to feel they're being heard and understood as they navigate this hugely unsettling and changing time. And we think that listening can be a really powerful tool. So that's what we do. We provide one-to-one ongoing free listening support for people who've been diagnosed. And we do this by training volunteers who've been interviewed and screened, and then we do quite a rigorous volunteer training program, and we're training volunteers in really empathy and active listening, and we have the support of experienced medical and mental health professionals who are kind of a safety net around us, so that there's various checks and support for volunteers, and to make sure that the Wrens, the people who come to our program, have the adequate level of support. And the focus of these sessions is really about the impact of autoimmune on life, on a person's relationships, on their work, on their sense of self-confidence and their sense of self. And so what we don't do is provide therapy or counselling. We know our limitations, we're not trained therapists, but we provide a space which is free from advice and free from judgment, just to hear and to understand what someone is going through. And to be a volunteer for the Ren Project, you don't need to have an autoimmune disease, you don't need to be experienced in what autoimmune is, but you need to be able to be empathic, to be neutral and non-judgmental, and to be able to offer this space of judgment-free kind of emotional support. And what we've seen so far is just the remarkable power of active listening. Okay, so let's see, I've got about 5 or 10 minutes left. So we became registered about this time last year. We've been supporting Wrens, which is our word for participants, since April. We anticipate offering support for about 9 months, but some people benefit from just 3 months of support, some from 12. And we do reviews every 3 months to gauge the benefit and to tailor and adjust our program accordingly. So it's a very flexible, person-centered program. And because of that flexibility and the model which works, we're able to scale it up and down. And this month we actually began to support people with long COVID as well, because increasing research shows the really strong autoimmune component of long COVID and very similar medical symptoms of fatigue, aches, loss of taste and smell. That you can read about the symptoms of long COVID, but medically, similar, but also emotionally, what we've really been struck with is the experience of grief, of loneliness, of isolation, of uncertainty, of fear, and the helplessness at the doctors not knowing what's going on. And beginning to support with people with long COVID, we've been so struck by the capacity of a disease to utterly change a person's life. And seeing people who have such a fear of not knowing how long it's going to last for, how bad it will get, and will they ever go back to who they were before. And that really speaks to the experience of a lot of the Rens we have with autoimmune disease as well. And it's such a lonely and scary time that we're so glad we can offer the support during it. So we started in April, so we've just done some of our 6-month reviews of people, of our Rens, and kind of taking a bit of it, it's almost our one year kind of anniversary of being registered by the Charity Commission. So we're growing and we're snowballing, and it's very exciting and it's very fast suddenly. And just kind of reflecting back on this time, we're so thrilled to be partnered with Thyroid UK and other disease-specific charities, as well as mental health charities, and also quite a few university disability departments who all then refer on to us. Because it's really important to us that we're not competing, but we're complementing the existing work that's going on. And also in collaborating with Thyroid UK and organisations that provide this specific support, we're able to then signpost in a really informed and kind of safe way when Rens come to us and say, look, I'm not sure about my medication, is it making me worse? We don't offer medical advice because we're not trained in that, but we can say, look, there's these charities that exist to help you, and here's their phone number, and know that they're going to get the right kind of advice. So that's one exciting thing. We're also getting more and more referrals from GPs and consultants, which is really good, as well as other partner organisations and word of mouth, and also through social media. And we're now supporting people across the UK because we do our sessions on video. It really allows us a lot of flexibility in who we can support. So it's really widespread geographically. Most of our Rens are women, which is representative of autoimmune disease at large. But it's very diverse in terms of the ethnicity and the backgrounds of the people we support. And it really shows that autoimmune disease is quite indiscriminatory. It does just affect anyone regardless of their background. And in age as well. So most Rens do tend to be in their 30s because a lot of autoimmune diseases are diagnosed around 18 to 30. But we're also noticing a lot of people in their 40s, 50s and 60s and 70s as well. And we support people really across every decade of life. And at the moment, we support about 35 people right now, but that's about to be 40. So we're just starting some new people next week. And there's over 61 different autoimmune conditions, some people will have one, some people will have multiple. And doing the reviews after the 6 months, the first 6 months, the feedback we've received is humbling and really, really encouraging. And we're seeing a change from the initial session to the first review session, that reflecting that the Ren Project is helping in all areas. In particular, Rens have reported feeling less lonely, more connected, and more empowered in advocating their own healthcare needs. And we think that this is going to have a secondary benefit as well, helping people to feel that they can sustain employment, that they're able to navigate relationships better. And also it would reduce the cost, we think, to the NHS in terms of missed appointments or medication not taken or A&E visits. So we think that the impact, we're focused really on the individual and the personal, but we think there is broader sort of social benefits as well. Okay, so I spoke faster than intended, which is classic for me, but that's really what we do in a nutshell. I'm really happy to take questions. And also if you think this would be something that would benefit you, do get in touch directly, or if you're interested in volunteering. But we're going to be doing another training for volunteers in January, and we're always looking for more volunteers. So yes, I will hand back to Lyn now. Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to speak.
I was just wondering, Alice, if you could explain how people self-refer?
Yeah, absolutely. So on our website is a really simple form that you just fill out. It's just your name and your condition, and then Kate, who's the founder and my colleague, she will give you a call and talk about what we do and how it might help.
Okay, so Our next speaker is Melissa Curran, a very experienced nutritional therapist. You may know Melissa from our previous webinar and our last conference. She's going to be talking about balancing hormones through the menopause, which I know has been difficult for a lot of people with thyroid disease. Hello, nice to see you again.
Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you. I speak to Lyn a lot, but it's lovely to see you. I think we've seen each other properly for a couple of years.
No.
So thank you so much for inviting me to this it's a really good cause. And Alice, it was really wonderful to hear your Ren Project too. I couldn't agree more about autoimmune just coming in 3s or 4s, because unfortunately that's the nature of the root of the imbalance. So a little bit about me before we begin. I'll just keep my eye on the time. So I'm a nutritional therapist. I've got a degree in nutrition. I've been practicing for about 15 years. And I've worked with Thyroid UK, as Lyn explained, and you might see my articles on nutrition and thyroid that are written every 3 months, and I always try and include recipes and practical advice, and I really hope this is going to be some practical advice as well. I'm not sharing any slides today because I just wanted to sort of spend the time kind of really thinking about the links between menopause and nutrition. But before we begin, I actually had my own thyroid issues, funnily enough, well, not funnily enough, but ironically enough, after having so many thyroid clients. So I do sympathize with you. I suddenly felt like my clients about 3 years ago of cognitive issues, and my energy levels were very low, and the physical and the sort of the mental were disconnecting. It's really hard to explain. It's like how I was speaking and how I was thinking wasn't in line, and that was due to a very slight subclinical imbalance in my thyroid, which I tapped into so quickly. So the problem with hormones, there's such a swing, whether it's sex hormones or thyroid hormones. So with menopause, there's estrogen decline, progesterone decline, and just the slight dip can impact you hugely. So the situation now is menopause is really highlighted. I think a few celebrities have got behind menopause, and fantastic, some women, and said, you know, if you're suffering menopause, please go to the doctor. Interestingly, the symptoms of low thyroid are very similar. Hypothyroidism can mimic menopause, and also menopause can trigger hypothyroidism. So I'll be discussing the reasons behind that and what you can do nutritionally and supplement-wise to help you. So what are the symptoms? So with menopause and hypothyroidism, low mood. So it's as if you're PMT, but every day for a lot of women. Low mood, tearful, low energy, weight gain, thinning hair, eyebrows, foggy head, forgetfulness, concentration difficulties. And, you know, like Alice said, you can speak to the doctor, and the doctor, if your markers are within range or blood tests, then you're absolutely fine. But sometimes menopause, and just like hypothyroidism, is a burner. It's a slow burner of dipping in that direction that you don't want. So it's really important to check in with your symptoms as well. It's really important to anybody on this webinar that has not been diagnosed with hypothyroidism. But if you do get tested by the NHS, always get access to your test results, because whilst they might say your results are negative, they're within range, they might not be in the optimal range. And whilst it doesn't mean it's not important to have a diagnosis, it's important to know where your levels are and where you thrive on those right levels of the blood tests. So it's always important you can talk to a professional, talk to a nutritionist, talk to a doctor, but make sure that you get heard and your symptoms get heard, and whether your blood tests are within range or not, that they get seen. So Estrogen enhances thyroid function. Estrogen is one of these anabolic, which means it builds everything up. Estrogen builds up bone, it builds up cognition, and it really helps fire up the thyroid. Subclinical hypothyroidism increases in women. It's a very female imbalance. And obviously menopause is only a female imbalance, and it all happens within similar ages, 40 plus. So if you go to the NHS and you're over 45, the NHS won't test your sex hormones at all. They'll just put you on HRT. HRT might work, but if your thyroid's not functioning properly, you will still carry on with those symptoms. So there's other areas to look for as well. So if you are feeling the symptoms that you're feeling, and even if your thyroid is within range, have a think about iron and B12 and vitamin D3. The thyroid really relies on these three main nutrients to function. Now, the NHS should easily be able to administer these tests. Now, as there's a huge backlog with the NHS, there's a lot of finger prick blood tests that I know Thyroid UK partner with as well, that you're able to access these fairly economically and get results quite quickly. So I want to sort of talk about iron and B12 in relation to the gut. So as we get older, I don't know whether this is familiar to anybody over the age of 40 that's listening. It's certainly familiar to me, and I'm in the health sector, but it's almost like you can't eat the foods that you used to eat, and you're kind of wanting to eat the foods that work for you. You don't want to be bloated. You don't want constipation. You don't want diarrhea. It's like this irritable bowel syndrome. And the situation is, as we get older, our hydrochloric acid in our gut is lower. So a lot of people then take omeprazole. I don't know whether you've heard of omeprazole, but it's basically inhibits the acid, so the symptoms of gastric reflux and heartburn stop. But then what you might get is excessive bloating and anemia, because we need a little bit of hydrochloric acid to help absorb vitamin B12, which is essential for energy. So I'm going to concentrate on the gut for now. So if you can imagine, you've got low hydrochloric acid, we're getting older, you might be diagnosed with hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, or you might not be. The symptoms are very, very similar. So what you can do is really focus on food, first of all, and rather than medication to mask your symptoms. The issue is when we have a lot of bloating and gas and flatulence and food sensitivities and constipation, etc., which is really common in hypothyroidism, what that's doing is it's driving our iron levels low, because what we're doing is we're creating quite a sterile environment in the gut when there's low hydrochloric acid, which means it's a breeding ground for unwanted bacteria. So you've heard of, you might have heard of microbiome, you might have heard of Yakult and yogurt's good to feed the gut. And these are beneficial bacteria that we all need. But when we do have a lot of the unwanted bacteria, it can actually drive our iron levels down, because it feeds off our iron instead of the iron feeding us or transporting oxygen around the body. So it's really, really important to look after gut health. And how do you do that? Well, it's really, really simple. Lots of vegetables, because that feeds the beneficial bacteria. So if you think of all the dark green leafy vegetables, the broccoli, the Brussels sprouts, probably all the things that make you gassy in the first place. So build them up slowly: broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, kale, beetroot, peppers, sweet potato, carrots. Not all at once, but start aiming for about 3 cups a day and slowly build up to about 6. And that eventually will really help you build a nice beneficial bacteria, increase your iron and increase your B12, and that will really help with energy levels. So how do you know if you've got this low hydrochloric acid? Well, as I said, the symptoms are a lot of bloating, a lot of burping when you've eaten food, possibly bleeding in the gums, a lot of gingivitis, because the gut and the mouth and the ears, and it's all the same mucosal areas. So sometimes if we've got halitosis or gingivitis, it usually means the gut isn't faring too well. So looking after the gut can certainly help oral hygiene as well. Another very well-known tip is lemon and water on rising. So you can drink lemon and water on rising to stimulate the acid, kill off the unwanted bacteria, and trigger some good digestion. And fermented foods as well, such as organic yogurts, homemade coleslaw. There's a really lovely fermented tea called kombucha, and that's a really delicious form of probiotic as well. Another tip is a little bit like the French, is just before you're having a big meal, you can have some bitter foods to stimulate your digestion, and that could be rocket, radishes, spring onions with a squeeze of lemon juice. So that's talking about gut health. That will help increase iron levels and B12. So please don't mask the symptoms with omeprazole and Gaviscon and Rennies. Do get help, do get advice. I'll pop in my email at the end of the session on the chat group. Additionally, vitamin D levels are associated with autoimmune disorders. So Hashimoto's, Graves' disease, all autoimmune disorders have the same root. It's where your antibodies aren't recognizing your own tissues as self. It's recognizing them as pathogens, as a foreign entity. So i.e. it starts attacking your thyroid. So vitamin D levels are lowered. Now, if this is a consequence of elevated antibodies, or the antibodies elevated as a consequence of low vitamin D, we don't really know, but most people with autoimmune disorders have very low vitamin D. And as soon as your vitamin D levels rise cognitively, you should start feeling better. So if any of you have not had your vitamin D levels checked, there is a finger prick, there's a blood spot. So you just prick your finger and squeeze it. It's so much easier than a finger prick test, and it's about £30. And it's from, if you Google vitamin D3 Birmingham, there's a hospital in Birmingham that sends out the kits for about £30. And do remember, if you do supplement with vitamin D, take K2 along with it. So vitamin D and K2 helps prevent that calcification in the arteries. So it's a safe way of supplementing. So I also want to talk very quickly, because I'm running out of time, about iodine. Iodine's really important. It's also important for breast health. So we're still on the subject of menopause. So iodine helps support thyroid hormones, and also it helps prevent fibrocystic breasts, which appear in that menopausal, perimenopausal age, and breast cancer as well. Incidence of breast cancer increase rapidly between the ages of 40 and 54. Iodine helps slow down or inhibit the proliferation of cells in the breast tissue. So if you have a deficiency in iodine, it's really important to supplement it, because the breast tissues need that. So how can you test for it? You can do a urine test for iodine, or you can just start supplementing iodine on a very low dosage, which I'll list at the end, or eat seaweed and seafood, kelp, nori sheets. Think of some sushi, salmon and prawns, miso soup. That's really important for your daily food regime. Just as like you've probably heard of selenium, that helps convert T4 to T3 with Brazil nuts. So urine tests are available through MediCheck and lots of labs. You can contact me, speak to Lyn if you want to know which laboratories are available. Also, phytoestrogens have been shown to help balance estrogen. Phytoestrogens basically are plant-based estrogens, plant-based diet, chickpeas, legumes, lentils. They all help to modulate, increase the estrogen in a safe way, and also help modulate immune function as well. So to wrap up, I'm just going to give you a list of supplements not to take, but to look at, because I don't know your levels of medication, but you might want to look at a dosage of iodine at 150 micrograms. and that would be quite a nice minimal dosage. A vitamin D starting off at about 3,000 international units with K2. For anybody going through perimenopause, Agnus castus, 650 milligrams a day. Selenium, you could have 3 Brazil nuts a day, or you could have 650 micrograms. Selenium 200 micrograms, and then magnesium 300 milligrams a day. So the main point is if you're eating well with the foods that I suggested, the seafood, the seaweed, the plant-based nutrition, the lentils, the chickpeas, the 4 cups of vegetables a day, 2 cups of bright coloured vegetables, hydrating, the lemon and water in the morning, and checking in with your symptoms as well as your tests. So if your test results are within range, but you're feeling not so good, then that's really important too, to see what you can do about that. So I'm available for nutritional advice, recipes, personalised supplements, testing, and I'll put my details in the chat. But I hope that's just given you a little taster to know that the menopause and the thyroid are so closely related, especially when we get to 40 plus. Thank you.
Thanks, Lyn.
Thank you.
And yeah, thanks, Lyn, and thanks, Thyroid UK, for having me. Alice Godfrey, Nutrition. And I specialise in helping people with thyroid health. I work mostly with tired women, as you can imagine, some men, but mostly women. And I kind of help them make little tweaks to their diet and lifestyle that help improve their thyroid function, calm their thyroid autoimmunity, if that's relevant, boost their energy, and just generally reduce their symptoms. So I thought today it would be good to talk about 5 of the changes that I make with all my clients. There are lots of others, but these are some of the key ones. So hopefully they'll be helpful. So I'm going to start. So the first one is gluten. And this is actually the subject of one of the short videos that I'm doing for Lyn that are going to be available next week. So there's a bit more information there, but it's quite a key one. So I didn't think it'd be a problem to talk about today as well. So gluten is like probably it's definitely one of the most common types of foods that we eat in the West. We could. It's kind of a go-to for many people, and you can quite easily have it for breakfast, lunch and dinner without thinking about it. But gluten is actually really quite inflammatory. It's quite hard to digest, and it can actually damage our gut lining. And it's heavily implicated when it comes to autoimmune thyroid disease. Gluten alerts the immune system to attack it, and then the thyroid basically gets caught in the crossfire. And this may be because gluten molecules are very similar in shape to thyroid molecules. So as I said, there's a really strong association between gluten and autoimmune thyroid disease that's been found in studies. And there are also a vast number of client stories, like not just mine, but colleagues of mine, and you read about it all the time, that have following a gluten-free diet can show a reduction in symptoms and also in thyroid antibodies. So I always say, give it a go, because you can just do it for kind of a month or 2 months, and you're not really going to be missing out on major nutrients there, and you'll find out, what difference it makes to you. So other things to watch out for if you are going to give it a go: be very strict. So even the tiniest bit of gluten can spark an inflammatory autoimmune response and spark symptoms and spark a flare up. So also be wary of the supermarket replacement gluten-free products. They can be really, really helpful. And I always say to my clients, use them for the transition while you're getting used to being gluten-free. But ideally, in the long run, you want to be kind of choosing different foods and using them a bit, because they are really handy. But the problem with them is that in the desperation to get something to taste and look like gluten, they add in all kinds of different additives and in different flours and ingredients, and our guts can also find them quite hard to digest. And then also, if they can't do that, get a gluten feel, or even if they can, they'll add in a load of sugar so that you'll enjoy it anyway. So yeah, just watch out for those. They don't all have lots of sugar, but just kind of read the ingredients. I'd recommend doing that, or kind of going for alternatives like rice pasta, and you can get lentil pasta. Also, you can make bread that isn't like springy normal bread, but you can make it out of, you know, gluten-free oats and nuts and seeds and things. Another thing to watch out for is cross-reactivity. So there are some foods which appear as gluten to the body, so they can also spark an autoimmune response. So if you do have autoimmune thyroid disease and gluten doesn't make a huge bit of difference, then it may be that one of these is causing an issue as well. But I don't want you to get hung up on those at the moment, because there's a long list of them and you may need help kind of working out which one's giving you trouble. You can test for it, by the way. So yeah, as I said, I recommend cutting out for about a month or two, ideally, if you can last that long, and then you'll really start to see what difference it can make. And it can cause inflammation all over the body. Personally, I stopped eating gluten, and this was before I was diagnosed as hypothyroid, but I was actually trying to get pregnant and someone recommended stopping it. And a couple of months down the line, the RSI that I'd had, really painful wrists, very stiff shoulders, just disappeared. So it can show itself in many different ways, not just kind of gut symptoms. So that's number one. Number two of the diet changes is healthy fats, and specifically omega-3 fats, which you may well have heard of. So most people eat a lot of omega-6 fats, and they are things like vegetable oils, peanuts. They're in processed foods, all kind of processed foods like crisps, pastries, salad dressings, biscuits. So people eat quite a lot of those, and then not that many of the omega-3 fats. And basically there's a ratio we need to keep, and things, if we're eating too many omega-6 and not enough omega-3, then we get this imbalance. And basically omega-6 fats are generally inflammatory and omega-3 fats are anti-inflammatory. So the best places to find omega-3 anti-inflammatory fats are oily fish. So there's an acronym to remember the oily fish, which is SMASH, which is salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. Maybe don't have too many of the anchovies because they are very salty, but they're still good to have sometimes. Wild salmon is better than farmed salmon for lots of reasons, but one of them in relation to omega-3, it has more omega-3 and it has less omega-6 of the inflammatory omega-6. So oily fish is one of the best places to get it, but not everyone eats fish. I understand that. You can get it in flaxseed and chia seeds, but they will need to be freshly ground. And also the levels are not anywhere near as high as they are in oily fish. And then also you can get it in beef and lamb, but it must be grass-fed. So the cows and the sheep must have been eating grass, because that's where they're getting the omega-3. And unfortunately, pretty much all beef that isn't organic will be grain-fed, not grass-fed. Although with sheep, you know, very often they're more likely to have been eating grass. You see them on the hills, don't you? So yeah, you wouldn't necessarily need that organic or for it to say grass-fed. But they're good places to get your omega-3s as well. So ideally have oily fish or grass-fed beef around 3 times a week. And if you can't manage that, then supplementing is a really good idea. And you can get, if you don't eat meat, you can actually get, or you don't want to eat fish, you can actually get algae supplements as well as fish oil supplements now. So number 3 is about carbohydrates. And it's basically about changing your relationship with carbohydrates. So it's really important to have all the macronutrients, we call them, so proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. It's really important to have them, you know, at every meal. But we need to be really careful with our carbohydrate intake. And that's not saying necessarily that you need to cut it down. But the main thing is to kind of have the balance. And this is to do with blood sugar balance, which is not just for diabetics. It's important for all of us, really important. So basically, whenever we eat anything, our blood sugar goes up and then it comes down again. When the pancreas releases insulin, it brings the blood sugar down again. And when we eat proteins and fats, so proteins, meat, fish, eggs, nuts, seeds, pulses, whenever we eat those things, our blood sugar goes up very gently and comes down very gently. And whenever we eat fat, the same thing happens. Goes up very gently, comes down very gently, and the body really likes that. It doesn't put pressure on the body. It's just like, okay, we can cope with this. We'll get back to equilibrium, nice and gently. But when we eat carbohydrates on their own, our blood sugar shoots up really high and then drops really dramatically. And if we have a carbohydrate breakfast, for example, then we just start off this roller coaster for the whole day. Or if we're having snacks that are carbohydrates, we get this roller coaster up and down, up and down. And the body finds this quite hard because it wants the blood sugar to be balanced. And so it has to work really hard to get it down and up each time. And it puts pressure on the pancreas. It also puts pressure on the adrenals, which are closely linked with the thyroid, because the low blood sugar actually stimulates a stress response, a fight or flight response. It also increases cravings. So we're more likely to be craving sugar. And it affects our energy and our mood. And the brain needs a constant supply of blood glucose so that it can do its jobs. And if it does, when it gets to these peaks and troughs, there's times when it's not getting enough. And this long term is going to affect, long term it's going to affect our mental health, but short term it's going to affect our mood and our energy. And things like brain fog. So what do we do about it? We need to keep it more constant and have more of the kind of gentle up and down. So things we can do are switch from a carbohydrate-based breakfast to a high protein breakfast. So, in the West, we're so used to carbohydrate breakfasts like cereal, porridge, toast. But actually, that fry up, maybe not so bad after all. Well, fry up, maybe, don't have it every day, and obviously we have to be careful of the dangerous fats, but eggs are brilliant. Also, if you like cereal or you like porridge, you could have a muesli with lots of nuts and seeds, and same with porridge, lots of nuts and seeds, and not anything sweet on it, or have fresh fruit on it rather than dried fruit. You can also add actually protein powder. You can get protein powder that's made of pea or of hemp. That's all it is. There's no added bit, so just be careful, don't get any that you get, that people like gym bunnies get, just the ones that are the pure protein, and put a bit of that in it, and that really helps as well. And then also with snacks, that's another place that we're quite, many of us, commonly have like a sweet snack or a carbohydrate based snack. So, it could be a slice of toast or crackers or pastries, or there's just so many things that we just naturally would go to instead of protein. So you can add nuts and seeds are really helpful, and you can have like a handful of those. You could even make up a trail mix of different nuts and seeds with a bit of dried fruit in. Just don't go crazy on it. Or like oat cakes with nut butter on them, or hummus, or raw vegetables with hummus. And if you are going to have something sweet, then try and have something that's protein before it, because that's going to really lessen the impact of the blood sugar rise on your body. And then no sweet drinks, ideally, because sweet drinks are the worst. Excuse me. They just send your blood sugar straight up, because it just goes straight into your bloodstream, the sugar, because it's so easy to digest. And then another thing you could do is work out your carb limit. So if you ever feel sleepy or crave sugar after eating a meal or a snack, then you've probably had too many carbs. So maybe kind of step it back a bit and try and get the balance on your plate, get a decent amount of healthy fats and protein. So number 4, I think there was a question. Are we going to do questions at the end, Lynn, or I think I'll just...
Yes, we'll be doing questions at the end.
Okay, fine. Okay, I'll just pound through. So number 4 is upgrade your fibre intake. So we all know that, fibre is important, but it really is important, particularly for anyone with a thyroid issue. What we need to do is increase the variety, first of all. So this is very important for our gut microbes. So it's been shown that if we have a broad variety of fruit and vegetables, then our gut microbiome, the bacteria in our gut, become more diverse, and diversity in your gut of these different bacteria has been shown to be associated with good health and being healthier and less risk of chronic disease. So that's what we want. We want a big variety of fruit and vegetables. You know, if you try not to get stuck in the same rut of eating the same vegetables, because yes, of course, it's good to have broccoli 3 times a week, but you know, next time pick something else up. When like a lot of people are shopping online now, but if you do go into the supermarket, have a look around, use your eyes to kind of see what's appealing. You know, we eat with our eyes as well as our stomach, or you know, the rest of it. So yeah, try and kind of mix it up a bit, and that will really help your gut health improve. Fibre is also really important for moving things along, and moving things along, which we know in hypothyroidism, your gut transit, moving things along, is that much slower. Hence, some people suffer with constipation. So if we can encourage that and have good fibre that's gonna move along, then that's going to take along with it toxins and dead bacteria that we don't want hanging around. So anything we can do there. And also, you know, anything we can do to improve our gut health is going to be good for our thyroid, because that is one of the places that we convert T4 hormone to T3 hormone, which is the hormone that needs, the type of thyroid hormone that gets into the cell. So as I said, a wide variety of vegetables. Then there are some vegetables which are particularly good, like food, or it's not really food, but what the bacteria use, what they consume, and that is there's some vegetables which are particularly good at that, and they're called prebiotic foods. And I've got a list of them here. I'll just pick a few out. So things like artichokes, asparagus. I mean, there's loads of your regular vegetables like carrots and Brussels sprouts and mushrooms and onions, sweet potatoes, cucumbers, chicory is a really good one. Also fruits, apples, avocado, plantains, really good. And then other sources, things like chia seeds, I've already mentioned them, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, wild rice is a really good one, even dark chocolate, would you believe it? But I'm not saying go and eat loads and loads of dark chocolate, but you can have some. So is that the end of my pre-fight? Oh yeah, and then one more thing I was going to say about fibre is, and vegetables, is eat more cruciferous vegetables if you don't eat many of those, because they are very helpful to the liver in detoxification. And again, with an underactive thyroid, you are more likely to have less effective detoxification by the liver. And the liver is another place that T4 is converted to T3. So yeah, important there. Okay, so number 5 is my last one, and it is water. So basically, just kind of try and make sure you're drinking enough. So the average, for the average woman, ideally, we want to be drinking around 2 litres a day. And that's not to include diuretic drinks like tea and coffee. Herbal teas are fine. And for men, it's kind of more like 3 litres. And that seems like an awful lot. But, you know, the body, especially if we suffer from low energy, which many of us do, it's so important. It's actually H2O is part of the chemical reaction that makes energy, that makes ATP, which is energy in the body. So, you know, if we don't have enough water, if we're slightly dehydrated, we're going to feel less tired, basically, more tired, basically. And, you know, I find that having a glass of water, if I'm feeling just a bit sluggish, drinking a glass of water can just turn things around completely. It's something we should go to more. So it's quite difficult to get into the habit though. So you can do things like take a large glass of water to your bedside when you go to bed, and don't drink it then, but drink it first thing in the morning, because you know you've had a whole night without water and you will be slightly dehydrated. So drink it then as soon as you wake up or as you're getting ready. You can also leave glasses of water small ones all around the house, which I'm not suggesting you do forever. That would be weird and slightly annoying, but in the transition of kind of getting to drink more, it can be really helpful, because you just see them and you're like, oh yeah, I'll drink that, okay, and then, you know, and you just kind of, it can be really, really helpful. My clients have found that, some of them. Also, you can buy a lovely new jug and fill it with water at the beginning of the day, put in some herbs or some strawberries or some, you know, obviously lemon or lime, just anything to make it slightly more interesting. I know it can be dull. But then the other thing that I find myself saying as well is just down it, you know, and just drink it. Yes, it's boring, it's not a very interesting drink, but it's part of your health, you know, it's like breathing, or not quite, but almost. It's something you need to do to be healthy. And then the other thing is filtering it. We heard this week that they're going to be putting fluoride in all of Britain's water. So, well, for that reason, but also, you know, there are a lot of impurities in there. There are hormones from the contraceptive pill, there are antibiotics, there are all kinds of things in there, which are particularly important when you have a hormone related issue, to remove, if at all possible. You can get, I think the best way to get most of these things out, if not all, is reverse osmosis, which you can get a filter fitted under your sink in your kitchen, which is not actually that expensive. I think it's a couple of £100, but might be worth something, might be worth considering anyway. So yeah, so that's it. So basically these 5 changes are, you know, they are likely to kind of increase your energy levels, reduce inflammation in the body, and improve your digestion and your metabolism. So, you know, even if you pick a couple of them and you do them consistently, then you're likely to see some kind of improvements.
Our next speaker is Sarah Tomlin, a nutritional therapist, who's going to explain how stress affects the thyroid. And I'm fairly stressed at the moment, so mine's going to go a bit funny. We could all find this helpful, I think, at times in stress.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. It's been great to listen to everybody that's come before me. I am actually going to share some slides, if that's okay, because I think that it adds value, because I'm going to talk about the mechanism of stress on the body. So it can be quite useful just to have a visual. So I'm Sarah Tomlin, as Lyn has introduced. I'm a nutritional therapist, and I use nutrition and lifestyle to combat the symptoms of thyroid disease, which, as most of you will know, can be very challenging, to say the very least. Today we're going to talk about how stress can actually affect the thyroid, and if you can find ways to de-stress or to implement things that can make you feel more calm, then it can actually improve your thyroid symptoms. So what is stress? Well, stress manifests in different ways, from emotional stress, physical stress, and stressors in the form of toxins, pesticides, as well as lack of sleep and elevated blood sugar, as well as some medications. And typical presenting symptoms can be insomnia, depression, fatigue, headache, upset stomach, and irritability. And as you can see, these are very similar to some of the thyroid symptoms that we present with. So it's really important to get to the root cause of what is actually causing these symptoms. Is it stress, or is it the thyroid? Because it's really important to find out the root cause so that we can target the correct area. So all forms of stress send a message through the body. That message, it throws off our cortisol and our adrenaline, which can subsequently cause our thyroids to underperform. And I believe it's a really good idea to get to know your body and to get to know what's going on inside, so you can get a better understanding of what can be the root cause and how you can heal. So during stress, we activate the HPA axis, and that stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. The adrenal glands are part of the endocrine system, just like the thyroid, and they're 2 little glands that sit right on top of our kidneys. And stimulating this axis leads to a release of glucocorticoids like cortisol and catecholamines like adrenaline. And both of these come from the adrenal glands that sit on the kidneys. And in fight or flight mode, or sympathetic nervous system mode, adrenaline is released in response to a threat. And it's important, to say the least, to keep us alive, because when we were cavemen and women, we needed to be alerted if there was a lion approaching, or if danger was going to happen, or if famine was an issue, and it would kind of increase our cortisol so that we responded to that message. Obviously nowadays stress comes in different forms, like bills, emails, a scary boss, or just life in general that brings us so much admin and things. So we really need to be careful that that stress does not become chronic, because when it's chronic, that's when we start to have real problems. So the effect of stress on the thyroid hormones has been well documented in research papers. It actually suppresses the hypothalamic release of TRH, the pituitary release of TSH, and the production of thyroid hormones from the gland itself. So all three mechanisms of production are all inhibited by stress. And this is just the production. So we've still got the transportation of the hormones to consider, how it travels around the body, and whether we've got the right nutrients and the right sources to actually create the proteins that carry the hormone around the body. And then that's not to mention the receptor site where the hormone is, like T3, is taken up into the cells. So all of those can be affected as well. And the HPT axis, so as well as the HPA axis, we rely on the pituitary to send signals to the thyroid in the HPT axis. So it's the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis. And when the HPA axis is disrupted, it suppresses the HPT axis, and thyroid function is diminished as a consequence. It also suppresses the conversion of T4 to T3. And as we all know, T3 is the active thyroid hormone, T4 is inactive. So while our T4 levels can be fine on a blood test, it's the conversion to T3 that we really need to look at as well. Because if it's not converting to T3, then we're unable to use it inside the cell. So the interplay between stress hormones and thyroid hormones also has an effect on the immune system. Stress hormones act on antigen-presenting immune cells, which may influence the differentiation of T helper cells, part of our immune system, and differentiation of the TH cells away from TH1, which you can see from the seesaw diagram, towards TH2, leads to a suppression of cell-mediated immunity and a potentiation of humoral immunity. In other words, there's a shift in the immune system so that the arm that deals with antibodies is stimulated. And that's where thyroid autoimmunity presents itself. So either as Graves' disease, which is hyperthyroidism in its autoimmune form, or Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is hypothyroidism, or underactivity of the thyroid gland. And these are diagnosed when antibodies, so thyroglobulin antibodies or thyroid peroxidase, TPO antibodies, are raised. And this is what is meant by the humoral response, or the TH2 arm of the immune system. So stress drives us towards this, and some of us are more susceptible to autoimmunity than others because of our genetic makeup, but our gene expression changes depending on the environment too. So the environment in which we bathe our genes has a huge influence on whether they're switched on or not, or how they're expressed. So their nutrition and lifestyle comes in so well, like Alice has just been speaking of, and Melissa, all of those changes that you can make to your diet gradually can all kind of help your genes to be surrounded by the nutrients that they need, and so that they don't switch on towards that unfavourable side of autoimmunity. And stress can be one of the environmental factors for thyroid immunity, so we really want to avoid it at all costs. It's fine in small doses, but not that chronic stress that we can tend to just find ourselves in without realizing. So what we're striving for is a balance of the immune system here. We want that seesaw to lie flat. And that's what the human body is always striving for. It's always trying to come back to that homeostasis. So homeostasis is the self-regulating process by which biological systems tend to maintain stability while adjusting to conditions optimal for survival. So the body's always trying to bring back balance. But if we don't help it, then it can go in one or the other direction, and that's when we start to get symptoms. So boosting the immune system, as well as addressing thyroid medication and support, are all things you can do to support yourself through times of stress. And especially in the last couple of years, we've all, I'm sure, experienced some level of stress that's kind of manifested in different ways. So paying attention to those symptoms is really important. So cortisol then, it's released from the adrenal cortex and the adrenal glands. And when stress is perceived, and I say perceived because stress is a perception, it's how we perceive things happening in the environment. So what I might find stressful, you might not, and vice versa. So it's us actually processing that information that manifests in stress. So an influx of inflammatory cytokines occurs when we are perceived stress. And these inflammatory cytokines actually get in the way of conversion from T4 to T3, and they block it. Stress also increases cortisol. So high cortisol levels impair this conversion as well. But cortisol isn't all bad. It's essential for our survival in acute situations, and it also helps to regulate our blood sugar level. And it increases body fat, again, for survival, for when we were cave with men and women, and it also defends the body against infections. But it's high levels of chronic cortisol that can have a negative effect on these things, and it can actually dysregulate our blood sugar if it's too high. So for example, cortisol will increase blood glucose, which impacts insulin, and then insulin gets high as it is released to bring the blood glucose from the blood into the cells. That's where we want the glucose, because we want to make energy from it. But if the insulin is dysregulated, sometimes if the insulin is too high, then the body stops reacting to it because it thinks that, well, there's too much, I can't cope with it, so I'm just not going to let any blood glucose into the cell, and then we have high amounts left in the blood, just causing damage, and which can actually lead to cardiovascular diseases and things where the glucose is actually damaging the blood vessels. And then your cholesterol becomes high, because the cholesterol's job is to go and repair those damaged vessels. So that can have a knock-on effect on that, and people kind of get scared of cholesterol, but really it's just, when it's high, it's just doing its job. It's asking the question, well, why is it high? What's happening? What's it trying to repair? And why is the damage being done in the first place? So the impairment of T4 to T3 conversion can really inhibit and impair you getting that active T3 into the cell. And so high insulin and high glucose is definitely something that you don't want. Insulin resistance is basically what I've just described. So again, it's the pancreas that releases insulin in response to blood glucose. So if you have a really carby meal, or a packet of sweets, or something really high in sugar, then your pancreas is going to release quite a lot of insulin to get that glucose out of the vessels, out of the blood, and into the cells before it does any damage. And if that keeps happening, then, as I say, the insulin becomes high as well, and the cells become desensitized to it, so it doesn't actually do its job and let the glucose in, which we don't want. So the insulin has nowhere to go but to stay in the blood. So hypothyroid symptoms can occur even though TSH, T3 and T4 may be normal, because of the thyroid hormone resistance at the cell level. So insulin resistance can mean that the thyroid hormone resistance occurs as well, where the same thing is happening in the thyroid and it's just not uptaking those levels of T3. So whilst blood work can look fine, actually what's happening at the cell level is where we're noticing that things aren't going quite right. So the T3 isn't actually being uptaken, and so therefore the thyroid isn't exerting its effect on the body. Intestinal permeability, or sometimes referred to as leaky gut, is very kind of damaging. 70% of our immune system lies in the gut. So the gastrointestinal tract, the lungs, the blood-brain barrier, they're all primary immune components of the body. And that's where immunity starts. So in the gastrointestinal tract, there are little holes that can occur, and these can be triggered by toxins, gluten, as we've spoken about already today, and stress. And adrenal stress weakens the barriers and it weakens the immune system. And in the gut-thyroid connection, when the barriers are breached, those large antigens, those large proteins from gluten or any other toxins or any kind of allergens, they go through the intestinal lining, through the little gaps, and that creates an inflammatory response as the immune system does its job and reacts. And when this happens over and over, the immune system gets out of whack and we become susceptible to other autoimmune diseases. So stress can turn on the gene where autoimmunity can express itself, and stress can also break down immune barriers and create an autoimmune flare. And that's where we see autoimmunity express itself too, in the form of celiac or Hashimoto's or Graves'. So inflammation is what occurs as a response to those antigens getting through that intestinal barrier. And the deiodinase family of enzymes mediates the activation and inactivation of thyroid hormone, as you may know. And the role of these enzymes in the regulation of thyroid hormone concentrations throughout the body is very well established. There's lots of research on it. Inflammatory cytokines will decrease D1 activity and reduce tissue T3 levels and conversion from T4 to T3. As you know, T4 is the inactive thyroid, T3 is the active hormone. So we want those levels of T3 to be present. The inflammatory cytokines, so the interleukin-1, interleukin-6, CRP, TNF-alpha, you may have heard of them, but those are the ones that increase the activity of D2 and suppress the TSH despite reduced peripheral T3 levels. So inflammation will stimulate D3, producing more reverse T3, which can block the action of T3, further causing cellular hypothyroidism by suppressing the intracellular T4 to T3 conversion and blocking the T3 receptor inside the cell. Little bit confusing, but hopefully you're with me. Estrogen, cortisol elevations decrease your liver's ability to clear excess estrogens. So the excess estrogens have to go through the liver down a certain pathway to be beneficial and for the metabolites actually to be excreted out of the body. Because hormones aren't just used once, sometimes they are, but they're reused several times before they are excreted, but we don't want them to kind of be reused too many times and kind of worn out so that they don't exert their beneficial effects. And we want to make sure the liver is working optimally to be able to excrete those metabolites out, because the unfavorable one can cause or can contribute to cancer, estrogen related cancers like breast cancer. So we really do want to optimize that, our liver. Excess estrogen will also increase thyroid binding globulin. So as I spoke about before, the transportation of thyroid hormone around the body is significant because it will reduce the amount of free thyroid available to be picked up by the cell. So it will show up in the blood as low T3 uptake and low free T3 and free T4. So women who take contraception containing estrogen can contribute to estrogen dominance, which can affect the thyroid because there isn't that level available because it's bound to this hormone that's carrying them around. So we can increase our cruciferous vegetables, fibre and protein and water. These all contribute to good liver metabolism. And I know goitrogens were spoken of before. And like Alice said, it's my understanding from the research I have read that it's not quite as much of a problem as we once thought. Obviously, it was that eating these vegetables raw was going to increase your goiter or cause a goiter, and that's not necessarily the case now. Or you would have to eat loads and loads of raw cruciferous vegetables for it to take effect. But if you cook the vegetables, then they're not going to exert any sort of goitrogenic effect. So if you have, like, I don't know, raw bits of broccoli in a dip or something at a party, it's not going to do you any damage. It might if you went on like a raw diet and everything raw, then it may kind of contribute to it. But for most people, it's not going to cause a problem. And oxidative stress, you may have heard of. Both hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism have been shown to be associated with oxidative stress, which is an imbalance of pro-oxidants, so damaging molecules, and antioxidants, which we make endogenously. So we make glutathione in our bodies, and the thyroid gland actually is a unique organ that requires hydrogen peroxide for thyroid hormone formation, and this is actually a pro-oxidant. And because of that, to combat it, thyroid cells contain antioxidants to protect their own cells from this hydrogen peroxide. And loss of this balance may result in thyroid cell dysfunction and thyroid disease. So it's really important that the oxidative stress is managed by antioxidants, and we can help with that by increasing our antioxidant intake from the diet. So green tea, blueberries, berries of all sorts, lots of just good kind of natural food that's grown under the ground or on a tree, or you know, just living things, plant-based foods, all the different colours of the rainbow as well, which I'm sure you've heard bandied about a lot. But red foods, orange, yellow, green, if you can try and include all of those different colours of the rainbow over the course of a week, sometimes it's difficult to get them all in one day, but if you can try and strive for that in a week, then you're doing well, because each of those colours means that there are different properties contained in that fruit or vegetable, for example. And in the skins where that colour resides, you'll get lots of antioxidants. So it's really important to include those to combat those pro-oxidants. So what can we do? Well, antioxidants is a big one. First, we need to remove things that may be irritating your thyroid and causing it to send out a stress signal in the first place. So things like toxins can cause thyroid inflammation as a result of this oxidative damage, and these trigger the thyroid to send out the stress response, which is picked up by the immune system. So gluten, as has been talked about, is a known antigen, and it can cause a lot of people problems. And other foods that can cause problems, even those like eggs and nightshades, they all need to be looked at because they're all different for everybody. And some people might get on fine with, you know, loads of tomatoes, whereas others might, you know, really suffer with indigestion. And it's about, you don't have to necessarily cut these things out forever, but it's about looking at what the triggers are and then repairing the damage that might have been caused by your gut reacting to these triggers, and then replacing any nutrients that is perhaps lacking. So why aren't you able to digest tomatoes? Well, it could be a hydrochloric acid problem. It could be you haven't got the enzymes there. It could be any other cofactors that need to kind of help in the digestion. So it's about looking at the person as an individual and finding out what their triggers are. And we also need to re-inoculate. So the stress weakens the thyroid through its actions on the adrenals and can help negative bacteria to proliferate. And if we've got lots of kind of pathogenic bacteria, there's not enough room for the good bacteria, and there's so much research on bacteria. You could do a whole day's webinar on gut bacteria, but we need to have that good bacteria to exert its effects on the body, and if there's too much pathogenic there, then you're just not making room for them. So you could have a probiotic or prebiotic, or I would recommend eating foods that are prebiotics, so the prebiotics actually feed the probiotics, so things like leeks and onions and garlic, and you can also have kefir and kombucha, as was mentioned earlier, and those kind of fermented things that will promote proliferation of good bacteria. And then rebalancing the adrenals and the immune system and our detoxification capabilities. And again, that's looking at the person as an individual and finding out which of those areas are really affected, and then how can we then we can discover things that we can give them that can target that through food or through supplements. But stabilizing blood sugar is essential because, as I say, cortisol is so intrinsically linked with insulin and blood sugar. So in the absence of type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, it's still important to keep blood sugar levels stable. Because if we don't, we can have those energy slumps in the afternoon, particularly about 4 o'clock. I find that clients tend to say, I can't, you know, that I should have like brain fog and I just could sleep for an hour if I were able to at 4 o'clock. Or you wake up and it takes a long time to kind of get going. So to do this, we can obviously reduce our sugary processed foods and caffeine, because caffeine pulls cortisol into the blood. It's often why people reach for a cup of coffee first thing, so that they can kind of get that hit of cortisol coursing through their blood. And reduce the carbohydrate heavy foods as well, like white pasta, white bread, even white potatoes could be swapped with sweet potatoes. Not all the time, because white potatoes are good, but you know, sweet potatoes are more fibrous, and they with foods that have a lot of fiber, then they tend to kind of hold back the sugar from going into your blood too quickly, like almost like a kind of net. As the fibrous tissues go together, the blood sugar doesn't get out so quick, so you don't get those peaks and troughs throughout the day where you have a sugar spike and then a dip where the insulin's come out to get all the sugar, left you with not enough sugar in your blood, and you tend to feel that dip. So balancing your blood sugar throughout the day is really good to keep your energy levels stable, and has knock-on effects to sleep and everything. So improve your quality of sleep as well. There's lots of things you can do with that. Limit snacking, include protein with every meal because it's satiating. You're less likely to reach for the carbohydrates, which can put that blood sugar level up. And other things you can do are obviously looking at your depletion. So what nutrients could potentially be lacking, and we can try and find that out based on symptoms. And tyrosine is a critical precursor to T4 and T3, and low dietary intake of this, as well as stress, can result in inadequate tyrosine, as adrenaline also uses tyrosine and in its synthesis and may compete for it. So if you're very stressed, then the tyrosine might be taken from the kind of thyroid pool and used in that part in the HPA axis rather than the HPT axis. Zinc, selenium, copper, iodine, they're all needed for the adrenal cortex to function. Obviously, they're needed for the thyroid as well. And the HPA axis will always take precedence, as it's for our survival. And I know without, you know, our thyroid is kind of critical to us being alive, but the cortisol is kind of the major hormone in the body that will always take precedence, because it could mean life or death if we are having to run from a lion. Magnesium, I know it's been mentioned, is brilliant for sleep, and iron levels need to be optimal as well. Vitamin D, Melissa talked about, so I won't go over it again. Omega-3, Alice talked about. Critical B vitamins, these help with the energy production in our mitochondria. And then you can have herbal adaptogens as well that are specific to stress, so they kind of moderate stress levels. Rhodiola, ginseng, schisandra, ashwagandha, those kind of herbs can be useful in helping you to be calm. Valerian as well is quite a good one for sleep, and theanine as well, which you can find in green tea. But all of these need to be considered on an individual basis, and interactions need to be checked. So yes, I wouldn't kind of recommend all of those as a blanket, but we can look at those on an individual basis and find out what suits you. So lastly, just another, not just, but a really important thing we can do is just implement stress management tools into our life. So yoga, deep breathing, meditation, walking in nature, exercise, and having fun. It's, you know, sometimes we lose sight of what makes us happy because we're just kind of in the middle of trying to manage our lives and getting sucked into this vacuum of busyness. And really, is it what we want? Do we want to be going on this kind of treadmill all the time, or can we step off it and actually figure out what we need? Meditation has been shown to really, really help. Scientific studies based on it, and it's about carving time into your day and putting it as a priority, that actually your health depends on you slowing down. So making time to fit that into the day is really important. And it engages our parasympathetic nervous system mode, not our sympathetic nervous system. So our rest and digest rather than fight or flight. And that's when, if we're digesting food well, then we're cleaving away all those nutrients that are in the food, and they're going to the bits of the body that need them. So that's it.
Okay, so I'm just not sure if everybody knows exactly what T3 is. So I thought I'll just give it a quick go over. I know that I think it's one of the speakers did talk about it a little bit, but just very quickly, liothyronine is the chemical form of the hormone T3, and it is available as a medicine, but unfortunately there's been some issues with the prescribing of it in the UK, which I'll talk about in a moment. The body actually produces T4, thyroxine, and T3. So the thyroid produces about 85% of thyroxine and about 15% of T3. And this will depend on whichever piece of research you read. It does change in some of the research. So the T3 is actually available because of the amount that the thyroid produces. It's available immediately, but the rest of it, most of it, needs to be converted from thyroxine into T3 in various organs in the body. But everybody converts at a different rate, and that can be due to nutrition. Things like selenium, you need to have plenty of, or your body won't be able to convert it very well. And people that have no thyroid, like myself, or that have had it destroyed by antibodies, probably don't have any T3 to begin with. So they really need T3, we find. So the liothyronine is the replacement medication, and some people find it very beneficial to add to their levothyroxine, and it can make a huge difference to their symptoms. But unfortunately, due to the massive price rise that the different pharmaceutical companies have increased it by over the past few years, the NHS restricted its use, and this is one of the reasons that we are campaigning. So you can catch up with what we've done over the past few years on our T3 campaign page, and I'll give you the link at the end. We've done a lot of things on our own, and we did a lot of work with the other thyroid groups, particularly the dossier. We worked with NHS England and other organisations to change the guidance because we weren't very happy with it. So unfortunately, COVID did put a stop to a lot of the campaigning. So not much has been done since COVID started, because Parliament weren't doing anything and the House of Lords weren't doing anything either. But during that time, we did let people know about the NICE guidance, which we did put a submission in. Unfortunately, it wasn't exactly what we wanted. We weren't happy with the wording, and we had to have various conversations with NICE to try and get them changed. One of the things that they did do was put a note in about the RMOC, the Regional Medicines Optimisation Committee guidance, that we helped to change along with the other thyroid groups. NICE did put this into the guidance, but it was hidden right at the end in a little footnote. We were not happy about that, because doctors and patients wouldn't be able to see it very well. So they did change it, and now it's a bit more visible. We have links to both the guidances and where the footnote, where the link is to the RMOC guidance, which is really important, because it states some important comments, one of which is the majority of patients suffering from hypothyroidism can be treated effectively with levothyroxine alone, but liothyronine is perceived to be an important medicine for a small proportion of patients in order to maintain health and well-being. And also it states the majority of patients suffering from hypothyroidism can be, well, I just read that one, sorry. The prescribing of liothyronine is only supported if initiated by or considered appropriate following a review by an NHS endocrinologist. And then lastly, in rare situations where patients experience continuing symptoms whilst on levothyroxine that have a material impact upon normal day-to-day function, and other potential causes have been investigated and eliminated, a 3-month trial with additional liothyronine may be appropriate. Well, because NICE point people to the RMOC guidance, this means that they actually approve it. And this is something that I think if you're going to try and get T3 back, or if you're going to try and get a trial of T3, you need to have this information. So do print the guidances off, highlight the relevant areas, and make a little dossier of your own of information that you need. So we know that patients are still having their T3 withdrawn. Patients are still being refused a trial of T3. And this is usually down to the various protocols of local clinical commissioning groups. We know that still a lot of CCGs are not allowing prescribing. Even if doctors and endocrinologists want to prescribe, they're not being allowed to. However, there has been some good news recently that we hope is going to make a big change. You've probably heard about the Competition and Markets Authority finding that they found from 2009 until 2017 that Advance charged excessive and unfair prices for supplying liothyronine tablets. In actual fact, the price rise actually began in 2007 and slowly increased the price by more than 6,000%. I remember having meetings with, it was Mercury Pharma then, and this was around the time that they changed it from the branded T3 to the generic T3, and it was at that point that they started to increase the price. The CMA fined Advance and 2 private equity firms called Cinven and HG Capital over £100 million altogether. So I don't know if you're aware, but Cinven and HG Capital were previous owners of the business, but they're now part of Advance. Private equity companies buy and restructure companies to make more money for people. Personally, I don't think this should be allowed. And we're very pleased that the CMA took this action. Although they were fined a few weeks ago, normally it takes, I think it's 6 or 8 weeks for the company that have been fined to appeal. But in the case of Advance, they asked for an extension of time to file a notice of appeal in respect of this. And this was granted on the 3rd of August 2021, which allowed them to extend the appeal until the 14th of October. So that time has passed. So I'm not exactly sure if they can appeal again. I don't think they can. But the CMA then have a period of time to put in an answer to the appeal. So that's what we're waiting for now. So in a couple of weeks' time, we'll find out whether they do actually have to pay the fine. And then by that time, I think things will start to happen. We are really hoping that the price of liothyronine will reduce even further. It has reduced. Bless you. It has already reduced. A couple of years ago, the price was about £248 for a 28 pill tablet packet. Now it's down to £92.51 at the moment. And we are hoping, especially if they are definitely fined, that the price will come down even further, and that CCGs will start allowing liothyronine to be prescribed more often. So this is one of the reasons I'm really interested to see what the answer is to Lord Hunt's question to Her Majesty's government, that are they going to take it off of a high price medicine? So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Thyroid UK will soon be putting together a T3 info pack, which will include the NICE guidance and the RMOC guidance. Plus, we have some letters, an email from the chair of NHS Clinical Commissioning and the Deputy Chief Pharmaceutical Officer of NHS England and NHS Improvement, which states, we anticipate that there are likely to be exceptions where prescribing may be clinically appropriate to continue. We also have a copy of a letter from the Medicines Policy Unit stating that NHS Clinical Commissioning have committed to recirculating the national RMOC guidance on liothyronine to reinforce this with their CCG members. Thyroid UK will be following this up and sending them a letter to find out whether this has been done and if there has been any responses to do with that. So what you need to do if you want to try and access T3, the first thing you need to do is to find a doctor, a GP, an NHS GP, and an NHS endocrinologist who is willing to help you. You might find out via our forum to see if other people have found a GP and an endocrinologist in your area. This can't be discussed on the boards, but it can be discussed by private message. We do have a list here of endocrinologists who we know have prescribed T3. So if you send an email to admin, TUK admin at thyroiduk.org, we can send you that list. The best thing you can do is to show proof that you need a trial. You need to have low FT3 levels. By low, it could be under the range or at the bottom of the range. Another option is to try and get a positive DIO2 gene polymorphism result. So there are testing companies that do the DIO2 gene test Although one of them, there's a huge backlog, so they've stopped doing them at the moment. But as soon as they come on board, which I think is going to be in November, if you can possibly afford to get it done, you would need to get it done privately because the NHS don't do it, I'm afraid. Another thing that you might come across as a barrier is that your GP may not want to prescribe T3. If your endocrinologist wants to prescribe it for you as a trial, he can do that with a prescription from the hospital. After the trial, he then needs to move it over to your GP. And for this, you need what's called a shared care agreement. Now, we have come across people who have managed to get a shared care agreement between the endo and the GP, but we've also come across GPs who don't want to do it, because once that happens, it means the GP then has to bear the cost of the T3. Now, because the price has come down, you could use this, and it may encourage them to take part in a shared care agreement. Hopefully the price will come down further. It used to be much, much cheaper. I think it was something like £9 a pack or something. I can't exactly remember, but hopefully it will come down a little bit more, and this might make people, might encourage the medics to prescribe it. We know that you shouldn't have to fight so hard for this medication, but it will make a huge difference to a lot of people. So we do encourage you to start fighting. Start writing letters. Don't just do it verbally, because once it's in writing, it might make more of a difference. Thyroid UK and the other charities, the other thyroid charities, are still campaigning for you. And we will continue to campaign until this matter is sorted. So we need your help to continue campaigning. We do need more money to, as I said before, we need a new office so that we can employ someone else to help us with the campaigning. And by doing this, it will help us continue what we call our vital work to help people with thyroid disease. So you can help us by donating. There'll be details of how to do this at the end of the webinar, but please donate if you can. Even £1 would help. If you found this webinar helpful, then please consider making a donation of £3, which you can do easily by texting TAW to 70085, or by clicking the donate button that's at the top right-hand corner of our homepage. Don't forget to join in our Winging It campaign to promote Thyroid Awareness Week and Butterfly Day if you can. So if anyone has any questions, then I can perhaps answer some of them. So I'll just stop the share for the time being. So if anyone does have any questions, I'll try and answer them for you. Let me just go to the chat. So there's quite a lot of questions. Okay. In terms of levels for T3, what should we be looking for in blood test results? I've read somewhere that even if your results show that you're near the top of the range, as always with thyroid hormones, it's what is optimal for you. Yes, I do agree that what is optimal for you. The problem is if you have a T3 level that is near the top of the range, I doubt very much if you'll get T3 on the NHS, because they will consider that that is optimal and you don't need it anymore. But yes, some people need higher levels, as in all the thyroid hormone levels. Some people are better at the bottom and some people are better at the top, depending on which test it is. So I'm currently trialing T3, but through private endo, after having been on T4 only for 1 year, optimal TSH and T4 all of 21, but still having symptoms. Addition of T3 makes a big difference already for me. Yeah, we do find this. Even, you know, it's only some people only need 10 micrograms of T3 and it will make a huge difference. Some people need 20. Some people need a lot more, though, I must say. Some people feel better on NDT. With NDT, there's more T3 in it than a human. So you would end up probably having more T3 than perhaps an NHS doctor would prescribe. But we do suggest constantly testing so that you can find out where your normal is, where you feel better. I'm still prescribed T3, but find there is little knowledge by doctors. Yeah, definitely. It does cause suppressed TSH, and this is a worry for doctors because they think it will affect your heart. But if they worry about that, I would suggest asking them to do a heart trace just to confirm that your heart is fine. It would be a good idea. Also, they suggest that it causes osteoporosis. So I would suggest again that you had a bone scan. Ask them to do a bone scan just to confirm that you don't have osteoporosis from being on T3. Okay, Hashimoto's. Oh wow, you have a lot of issues. She's on 75 to 100 micrograms levo. There's a huge overlap with my symptoms. Yeah. Not currently, because numbers are normal. It's very difficult if you have more than one autoimmune disease or other diseases as well as thyroid disease. Sometimes it's really difficult to work out which symptoms go with which disease, unfortunately. With B12 deficiency, the symptoms are even closer. All I can suggest really, and I'm not a medic, is just to try one thing at a time and see what helps. It's probably better when you have a lot of different diseases to try and find a medic that would be willing to help you a little bit closer than you can get on the NHS. Mm-hmm. I was told by my endocrinologist levothyroxine is the treatment. I'm in Scotland, yet someone in a support group 12 miles away from me gets it prescribed. Other people had to fund it themselves. It varies so much up here, I do not understand why. You're talking about levothyroxine, or you're talking about T3. I mean, we know there is a postcode lottery all across the UK, and this is something that is not supposed to happen, and it's something that we really have tried to campaign about. But the price hike of T3 really got in the way of that, and then so did COVID. So these are things that we will be looking at in the future. Ah, yes, so you did mean liothyronine. I mean, you should really be able to get a trial. But as I've said before, get some T3 testing done, try and get the DIO2 test done and see if that helps. Can NHS not source T3 from other companies? This is something I'm often asked. And unfortunately, I mean, if you've got a really good and understanding doctor, he could put the name, he could put Henning on the prescription. And then you could find a pharmacy that will access that one for you. We do have a list of pharmacies, both wholesale pharmacies and non-wholesale. Some of those can get it on the NHS if it's marked on the prescription. If you can get a private prescription, some doctors will give a private prescription, then you can access the Henning from UK wholesale pharmacies who will get it in for you. And the price is much cheaper than the UK. It works out, I think, about £40 to £50 for 3 months supply. So for a lot of people, that is doable. I was also diagnosed, but not sure what triggers symptoms. Okay. The endo team at my local hospital don't accept DIO2 test results. That's unfortunate. I've not had that before. Generally, they do accept. But I don't know what to say about that really, because you might change your endo, but if it's the team that aren't doing it, perhaps just start writing some letters, go to your local pals and see if you can get something done like that. I know it's difficult fighting sometimes if you're not that kind of person, but perhaps try taking, I know this sounds a bit sexist, but we have found if you take a man in with you to an appointment, sometimes it works a bit better. They'll listen a bit more. I know it shouldn't be like that, but it is. If you still have your thyroid intact in order to apply for T3, do you have to show that you've tried all the nutritional methods and reduced your stress levels in order to make sure they are not the reasons for the lack of conversion? I mean, we always suggest that people try other things first, you know, check your selenium levels or try taking selenium to see if that helps. Try all the other nutritional things, get a good multivitamin and mineral tablet, try and see if that works. Reduce your stress. Definitely try these other things. And for some people that will work. To be honest, a lot of doctors, when you go to see them, they wouldn't even think about the nutritional side of things, and nor endocrinologists, but do bring it up, because the more that they understand about that, the better. Do I have to ask my GP for a shared care agreement, or does my NHS or private endocrinologist ask for it to be set up after my trial? In my experience, a shared care agreement isn't always asked for. So just see what happens. You know, if your endo writes to your NHS GP and he's willing to prescribe it, don't mention a shared care agreement, because it will just be another barrier against getting it. But if you hit a barrier with that, then you might need to start fighting to try and get a shared care agreement in place. Texting tour doesn't work. It's funny, for some people it does work, it works fine, but for a few people it doesn't work. If you're finding it doesn't work, then please just go to the donate button at the top of our homepage and donate the £3 that way. So yes, I take 10 micrograms in addition to 40 to 45 of Levo, and this seems beneficial so far. Everybody is so different. I'm a bit confused as to whether I've Hashimoto's or not. The haematologist appointment I had last year said that I had autoimmune hypothyroidism, as I already had pernicious anemia, which is also an autoimmune disease. I have high TPO antibodies, so is that Hashimoto's? It seems that only 90 to 97% of autoimmune hypothyroidism is Hashimoto's. So what is the definition for Hash's? If you have the TPO antibodies, especially if they're very high, it's probably Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's is the cause of about 90 to 95%, I've heard, of thyroid disease. So I would say you do have Hash's if you've got TPO antibodies. Often, once you go onto thyroid medication, sometimes Levo works well, the antibodies will come down. And as far as I'm aware, the more of your thyroid that is destroyed, the antibodies will come down, but not for everybody. Sometimes people always have antibodies. And you can have flare-ups, they can go down, and then you can have Hashimoto's flare-ups, which I think can often be linked to stress. So the less stress you have, the better. I've been told to have my T4 at the weekend because on TSH being below the range and retest in 3 months. Okay. Some people can take T4 every day. Some people take it alternative days. Some people have been told to only take it at the weekend. What I will say is it can reduce your TSH, but if you're not having symptoms of overactivity, so if you're not feeling hot all the time, having tremors, things like that, then you're probably not actually on too much. What I would suggest is if you just always take your TSH, always have your testing at the same time of day, because that can change up and down. A lot of people don't take their medication before their test because that can give a spike in T4 and possibly then lower your TSH. As I say, I'm not a medic, I just go on my own experience and experiences of others that I've heard. Okay, wow, lots of questions still. Any particular fillers in synthetic meds that tend to cause problems? I don't think I get on with mannitol, for example, and definitely didn't with Fibre T4. Very experienced, is there ever any chance of getting tyrosine prescribed on the NHS? Okay, we do know that mannitol is causing issues for a lot of people. There was a huge problem in France with it, and they managed to overturn it with a huge campaign they had over there. This is a campaign that we do want to do, but as I've said before, we need more staff. We can only deal with one campaign at a time. I do know that other people have had issues with other things that go into the tablets. On our list of medications that we have, medication list for hypo and a medication list for hyper, we do know that there are some other thyroid tablets with various different excipients, and there are some with hardly any at all, but for those ones they are more expensive and you would need to get it prescribed by your GP. I do know that some people have managed to get tyrosine prescribed on the NHS, but they would need to ask their GP to write it on the prescription as a particular brand. Okay, so different endo in London. After experience several local team, there are at Cedar Centre in Guildford. I've heard from 2 other people who had bad experience, so be aware if you want a second opinion, unless they had changed their tune in the last year. Tour doesn't work for me either. Thank you very much, Dawn. Oh dear. My GP told me to go for a walk for 20 minutes a day to solve all my thyroid problems. Very helpful, not. That's not very helpful, is it? I've never seen an endo, should be seeing one, my bloods fluctuate. I mean, you can ask for an endo, but you may need to fight to get one. I mean, it was bad enough before COVID, but now COVID is here, and because of the issue of only endocrinologists being able to prescribe, obviously their lists have got longer and longer. So what they tend to do is look at the test results that the GP sends them. If you don't have a low T3, then they often won't give you an appointment, I'm afraid. I'm on 225 micrograms of levo a day. This seems a lot compared to others. Yeah, it is. It's not a hugely high dose, but it is a lot. I mean, I think the average is about 150 micrograms. Personally, I'm on NDT and I'm on 3 grains, which is equal to 300 of levo. Some people I know are on 4 or 5 grains. Some people I know are on 400 levo. It's very rare to find a GP that would give those high doses though. So the new endo in London likes to check the peak at 5 hours after meds. I always used to do it in the morning before meds, but now having to do the test later in the afternoon, and I tend to stretch it to 6 to 6.5 hours. The problem is the TSH reduces quite quickly after 9 o'clock, and then it reduces even more in the afternoon. So if your doctor's looking at the TSH, you have to be careful because it might show low in the afternoon. Paid privately with Blue Putty and endo, was in with her 5 minutes. She increased my levo from 125 to 150, had blood test after 3 weeks, and she put me back on 125. Told to eat 1 carb meal a day, also had a throat scan, but all okay. Come out not really with any further knowledge or advice of what to do. I mean, I would definitely look at other issues just in case. Check your selenium levels if you can.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
Sorry, I can hear some interference in the background. That it's difficult to hear you. I'm wondering if everybody could mute themselves, if that's possible.
Okay. Let me just check. I thought everybody was muted. Cat Girl isn't muted. If you could.
No, that's me. I've just unmuted.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah.
Everybody else is muted except for me. So.
Sorry.
I
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
And then thank you.
Oh, Oh, sorry, let me go back to.
Somebody called Claire Bell isn't muted.
Okay, I've muted her now. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry, let me just go back. What range is low T3? Obviously, all the tests, the levels of the test change depending on which area you live in. T3 is, it can change. It's somewhere between 3 and 6 or anywhere in that region. So really, just you need to know what the range is and then where your level is. So anywhere near the bottom is classed as low, and the same for T4 really. It's difficult because everybody is different. In my area, T4 is 12 to 22. In some areas, it's something like 17 to 19 even. So it does depend on the assays that your area is using. I only check, if I only check the peak, what does it likely mean at other times? I wonder if I might show underdiagnosed at other times when the peak is within range. It does depend, and we always suggest have it done at the same time every time, so that you've got something to go by, you've got a benchmark. Is a hoarse throat a symptom of hypo? Yes, definitely. A lot of people have that as a symptom. Speakers are. Thank you, Zoe. I hope you managed to do some of the things that I've suggested. Is it best to take tablets in the morning and wait 30 minutes before eating, drinking? Definitely wait at least 30 minutes before eating and drinking. Some people find it best to take the tablets in the morning. Some people find it best to take them in the evening before they go to bed. Again, it's very individual. It's just by trial and error that you can find out. I have a private specialist in Oldham who does not work for NHS. He's coming from Poland. So what you say, he is not able to prescribe T3? If you're seeing a private specialist, he'll give you a private prescription. If he's registered in the UK, then he can give you a UK prescription. But I don't know. Pre-Brexit, he may be able to give you a private prescription. I am not sure. You need to ask him when you see him. Okay. Any advice on how, if lowering hormone levels can affect dose of levoline? We're stable on levoline, but on last test, my T3 level is now slightly high above range, which coincided with low estrogen symptoms starting. Endo has left me on same doses for now, with retest in 3 months. I mean, obviously HRT isn't really my area, but I do know that estrogen, I think, you know, during the talks, estrogen can cause an issue. But what I'll do is I'll ask the speaker that spoke about hormones that question, and I'll get her to respond. Sorry. Boots recently changed manufacturer. I think you'll probably find, so this is Dawn, Boots recently changed the manufacturer supplying my Levo, and I noticed a deterioration in my health. Can you tell me where to find the details on your site of the best one without the mannitol, please? And I will ask my pharmacist to order in. If you can send me an email to enquiries@thyroiduk.org, then I can send it to you. What I will do though, everybody that attended, all the attendees will get an email on Monday with a copy, a link to the recording, and I will put that in the email. I'll put some of the things that I've talked to people about in the email, links for them. I've heard it's okay to take T3 with food, contrary to T4. Is that your experience? The problem is there was some research about T4 and food and coffee and calcium, but I don't think there's been any actual research about this, not that I'm aware of. So we're just assuming the same will happen. So it's probably best to take it without food. I know that's difficult if you take some in the morning and some in the afternoon. All I can say is just try it and see what happens. You'll soon find out if you start to notice symptoms come back. What about having it around other meds and supplements? Again, we know that T4, you shouldn't be taking it with iron, coffee and calcium. It's best to leave it 4 hours for some of those, 2 hours for others. So we usually suggest taking those things around lunchtime. Some of them you have to take with food anyway. I've only been on leave for a couple of weeks, only just diagnosed. I'm getting very little sleep. Does this ease off? It does. I mean, 2 weeks actually is very little time to see improvement. It takes about 8 days for levothyroxine. The half-life is 8 days to get into your system. So it will be possibly, I know it's bad to say, I don't want to upset you, but it can take a few months for you to actually get back to normal if your body doesn't need T3. So 2 weeks is really very small amount of time. It's not like taking a painkiller. It can take a few weeks for things to take effect. What you'll notice is that in a couple of weeks' time, you might find that you feel better one day. The next day, you don't feel so good. And then you'll have a couple of days later on that you feel good, and then you'll go back and you don't feel well for 3 days. This is how it often works. Whatever you do, when you have a good day, don't start doing the garden or start painting somewhere or do anything that you think, oh, good, I'm feeling great, I'm going to get this done. Don't do that, because that will make things worse. You really need to wait. Don't overdo things right at the beginning. Just because you feel well for a couple of days, it can put you back a bit. Is it normal to have temperature fluctuations, hot and cold? I have to have a fan on in the night sometimes. It does seem to be for some people. Obviously, I don't know your age. It could be mixed in with menopausal symptoms. It could be that you have Hashimoto's, and that can sometimes give you overactive symptoms sometimes and other times. Everybody is so different, so I can't really give a definitive answer to that, except that for some people it can be like that. Taking HRT definitely reduces the absorption, as I found to my detriment. So there are some things that you need to increase your levothyroxine for, unfortunately, but do test first before you do anything like that. I know from the forum that changing brands of levo can cause problems, but is it the same with Lyo? My surgery keeps changing the brand, but refuse to believe that it could cause problems. I may be wrong here, but I do think that it's possible that some of the brands of T3 have mannitol in as well. So I'll definitely put the link to our medications for hypo page up. And then you can check all the ingredients of all the brands of T3, natural thyroid hormone, and levo. Is the levo causing the lack of sleep? I've not heard that, but if you go onto our forum and ask a question, I'm sure people will answer that. Yes, I've had 3 Lyo and 1 works better than the others. Definitely for all of the thyroid hormone replacements, because everybody is so different, it can make a difference, just the different ingredients. How long does it take for T3 to make a difference after starting 5 micrograms 3 times a day? Again, everybody's so different. Some people find a notice almost immediately. I know for me, when they put me, after my thyroid operation, they put me on 200 micrograms. And I had a feeling that it would be too much because I started reading up a little bit, but they said, no, you've got to take it all. And it was that night. I took the tablets in the morning, and that night I didn't know what was going wrong. It affected me almost immediately, and that is not supposed to happen. Doctors tell you that that doesn't happen, but for some people it does, and I don't know why. Some people obviously don't absorb things very well, so you might not get the full effect. So because everybody is different, it will be different for everybody. So if you have no thyroid due to cancer, would you be classed as hypo or hyper? If you have no thyroid, you would be underactive, so that's hypo, because your body can't make thyroid hormone. Your thyroid isn't there to make thyroid hormone. Thank you, Curran, for signing up for membership. Thank you. I've read a lot of contradictory advice about foods. One is not to eat kale and Brussels sprouts. I've changed from soy milk to oat milk. Hope that's okay. We'll get in touch with Alice. As Alice said, goitrogens can cause a problem if you eat a lot raw. But as long as you cook them and you don't eat absolutely loads and loads, you should be okay. Things have changed a little bit about that. Obviously, overcooked cabbage isn't very nice, but just cook it normally. Don't have it too undercooked, and I think you'll be fine. Soya milk. I mean, there is some research that shows that soya can affect, but I think it's if you have a lot of soya milk. I think if you just have a little bit, it might be okay, but again, everyone's different, and probably oat milk might be better for some people. So I think that's all the questions there. So if you have enjoyed this, then do please donate. Thank you so much for coming. I will be apologising most profusely for those that couldn't get in, but I will be, it has been recorded, so we will be recording this and sending the link to everybody so that you can watch it again or watch different parts of it again. We'll be editing it, taking out the non-important bits. So the next slide, I'll just share the screen again. And the next slide will have everything that you need on it. So you can see that there's our campaign page, the online community, MediChecks. Don't forget that they're donating £2 for each thyroid test ordered during Thyroid Awareness Week. Our YouTube channel, the videos will start going on there on Monday. Any questions for the speakers, send to enquiries@thyroiduk.org. Also, for copies of the NICE guidance and the REMOC guidance, write to tuckadmin@thyroiduk.org. And to donate, text TAW, TAW, to 70085. If that doesn't work, and I don't know why it's not working, please go to PayPal to donate. So again, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much to all the speakers. Thank you, Caroline. I'm glad that you managed to get in as well. I hope that everybody has something to take away from all of that and that it helps, but you know where we are. Try and join in with all the activities that we're doing. Let's try and get thyroid disease out there as much as diabetes is and heart disease, because it does cause a lot of problems for a lot of people, makes people very unhappy, and they can't do the normal day-to-day things. So do try and join in with all the activities. So thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon.